Views and opinions of any of the guests of After Hours AM are not necessarily the views and opinions of After Hours AM, its hosts, its staff, or any of its affiliates.
Welcome to the After Hours program.
Are you ready?
It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
Now broadcasting live from the After Hours AM studio, Joel Sturgis and Eric Olson.
Good evening. Welcome to this edition of After Hours AM. I'm your host, Joel Sturgis. Right along with me,
Eric Olson.
Hey, Eric, tonight's a great show on tap. Like always, we got our good bud, Matt Swayne, coming on, and he recently released a book, Haunted World War II. Cool book. I love this title, Haunted World War II. Soldier Spirits, Ghost Planes, and Strange Synchronicities. And he'll be joining us top of next hour. You're not going to miss that, boy, because that is a fascinating subject all by itself, World War II. But we're adding the ghosties into it, man.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it is the largest and, of course, most devastating event in world history. And I do mean world history. It involved literally the entire Earth, hence its name, World War II. Millions and millions, tens of millions of people killed. It was just devastating, horrifying, really amazing. On the other side of the coin, there was, millions of acts of heroism, people, selflessness. I think a better world was created out of the Allied victory. As a result of it, doesn't mean it was a positive thing that had happened, but certainly coming out of it, I think a better world was created. So it's so fascinating, and just the thousands, tens of thousands, millions, literally, of stories that go along with that. And then, like you said, when you add in the paranormal, and not just the ghost side of it, you also had the sort of witches and wizardry side of it, where people were really trying hard, summoning all their powers to try to influence the outcome. So it is a fascinating tale. And yeah, Matt's a good friend of ours. He's been on several times. I know you've known him for a really long time.
Yeah.
And multiple author, lots of books, always good stuff, written about music. I know he's got another one out about railroads, haunted railroads.
I'd like to get into that.
Fall.
Yeah, I'd like to get into that a little bit, too, if we could during the interview. But, of course, we're going to stay mainly with the Haunted World War II. But I'm also fascinated by railroads. I mean, the haunted trains, the people see these things. So, of course, we'll have him on for a full show about that in the future. But I'd like to touch on just for a minute anyway. So that'll be a lot of fun. Top of next hour, Haunted World War II. It's the newest book from Matt Swayne. Very, very interesting stuff. And I know that just before airtime, you had the strangest, I shouldn't say strangest, but strange and a sad, if you wouldn't mind talking about it. And that's up to you, sir.
Oh,
the
no,
strange psychic almost premonition, and that's...
The thing is, I just get so infuriated with myself when I don't follow up. A really good friend of mine, really good, one of my best friends, all the way back to college, on and off, spent a lot of time as adults. He went through some things. I've been through some things. I lived in California for quite a while. And we hadn't been in touch lately now for the last, I don't know, it's been a few years, and I feel bad about it. But here's what happened. Really recently, maybe starting as long ago, possibly as a month, but in particular in the last week, his name kept popping up in my mind. And, we talk about this stuff all the time on this show. When you're having that kind of an intuition, especially something that recurs, follow up on it. And I did not. I'm in the middle of all these other things. Just found out another friend of ours, the first keyboard player in our band when we started the band, almost 10 years ago now, He just died. Just found out about him. And of course, you know all about the family stuff, so I'm not going to get into that. But it's just been kind of one thing after another. We're preparing for a trip. We're dealing with all the, the estate of my parents and all their stuff. And it's just one thing after another. My daughter's finishing up her first year of college, and it's very stressful. I think she only has another week and a half or something, and she's got all this stuff that she has to do. And there's just been a lot going on. And on the positive side, Alex, the youngest boy, was the lead in the school musical, and that's still just a week and a half ago. So there's been all this stuff going on. All that really is just an excuse. I didn't follow up on it. I should have followed up on it, and I am not exaggerating. Not 30 seconds before Joel just called me to go on the air, I got an email saying he had passed away. Now I'll never be able to talk to him. I am very upset with myself. And obviously I'm extremely sad he passed away. And he wasn't old. He was maybe 61, I guess possibly 62, but certainly no more than that. There were issues. I can't tell you I'm shocked. He was overweight. And he never stopped smoking. Never. He never stopped smoking. And, by the time you get to be 60 years old, man, he'd been smoking for what? 45 years, maybe?
Wow. Yeah, that's a long time. And heart goes out to his family and you as well, Eric, because it's a profound loss. It's a friend from your youth, and that's always a hard thing to have happened to you. That happened to me a couple months ago. A friend of mine dropped dead. Otherwise healthy, nothing wrong with him. Massive heart attack, dropped dead. And so, yeah, that just happens sometimes. But that is I want to say it's partly amazing when that happens to you, and it's like there's a knock at your mental door, saying, hey, you need to find this person. And that's happened to me multiple times. And like you, I've been too late most of the time, because I, put it aside. Life gets in the way. So if you're having those feelings, call them up. You know what I mean? You just never know.
Exactly. And I'm obviously this isn't about me. This is about a friend of mine who passed away. And I heard from his ex-wife, who was still close, and they have two boys, and I just feel, and they're not that old. They're maybe a little bit older than Lily, early 20s, I imagine. And so, they're not that old, and it's awful. And he was a great guy, very interesting, really funny, very talented musician. Just really a great guy. And I feel bad that I allowed us to drift apart. I feel bad that I didn't follow up on my intuition. And, like I said, every time I don't do that, it turns out I should have. And I don't know why I still, at this point in my life, am able to put those things aside, because it was clear that something was trying to get at me, that the word was trying to come through. I just... well, anyway, so that just happened.
Well, that's, again, heart goes out to his family and for their loss. And, wow, just that young to be losing your father. That is just sad beyond sad. Okay, moving along, though, Eric. There's a strange lawsuit that's brewing in cryonics. A cryonics lawsuit. Son fights for father's frozen head. Not quite sure what he's going to do. Should he get his father's head?
That's like the Disney rumor, which is not true, of course.
Dr. Lawrence Pilgram didn't believe in heaven, but he did believe in life after death. In 1990, at the age of 66, Pilgram signed a contract with Elcor Life Extension Foundation to freeze his entire body upon his death, with the hopes that decades later or centuries later from now, medical science would have caught up and they would have found a way to resurrect him. And Elcor headquarters is headquartered at the Sand-Colored Business Park in Scottsdale, Arizona. Offers two types of cryogenics, Eric. You can have the full suspension services, which means your whole body gets frozen for $200K. Or you can opt for the much cheaper $80,000 procedure of just your head. It's a bargain for a shot, though. If I can talk tonight. My gosh, it's been one of those days. Immortality, clients typically pay by signing over their life insurance to the company, which we've heard that before. We've read stories before, how it gets paid for, and normally that's what happens. The head-only option, the company explained, is the most cost-effective way to preserve a patient's identity. Using future nanotechnology, a new body might be grown around the brain. But Pilgrim never liked the idea of just that. He did not want just his head preserved sitting there. His family...
it seems limited.
It really does. You just don't know. What if they can't grow a body? What if they find a way to reanimate, your brain cells and your body cells that, as long as it's been frozen, just fine. But the body just never quite caught on. That whole idea. What do? You're just a floating head in a jug? They take you around.
The brain that wouldn't die.
Exactly. Kind of reminds me of Futurama, that one doctor. That's just he's got a body, but then his head is encased in glass.
Yes, of course.
Well, he never liked the idea of just his head being frozen, and he, of course, chose the whole body preservation by initiating the appropriate, checking the box, saying, yes, this is what I want on the contract, with explicit directions that should he die, they come and collect the body. All right, not a problem. Fast forward to 2015. When Pilgrim was 90 years old and he died of an apparent heart attack on the sidewalk in front of his home. And the people that are in charge of Elcor, they showed up. And guess what they did, Eric?
What did they do,
They
Joel?
just cut his head off.
Oh, God. Even though
it didn't go as planned. Yes. Now, appropriately, he checked the box, saying, "Hey, I want my whole body frozen. I don't want any of this head nonsense going on. I want the whole thing frozen." So, of course, they dispatched people to where he was at in the morgue, and they put only his head on ice, and they took it back to Scottsdale. The rest of his remains are cremated and mailed to his son. Gee, that's a wonderful way to get your dad back, in the mail.
Oh, my God.
Then when Kurt demanded to know why his father's whole body wasn't preserved, like how he checked it on the little contract, he received a conflicting accounts that Elcor, according to court records, first the company said Lawrence's body had decayed beyond saving. Then it claimed that Lawrence did not keep up on his $525 membership dues.
Oh, my goodness.
Finally, it suggested the technicians didn't want to wait for a permit, the permits necessary to transport a body across state lines. Wow, that's a whole lot of triple talking going on there, trying to cover their butts.
Oh, my God. Yeah, that's pretty terrible.
With
really
no
is.
satisfaction with any of those answers, and pretty mad by this point, he decided that the son decided it is time to go to court. Well,
I would say so.
Elcor, throughout the process, blocked. They tried to block it with a payout. Of course, they just want to pay off, give the son the remainder of the life insurance minus the $80,000 to be able to freeze his father's head. Well, Kurt wouldn't have any of that. Kurt sued like any red-blooded American would do, when all you have is your father's body but not his head. So he ended up taking
the American way,
going to trial in Santa Barbara at the Supreme Court. Next year, it's slated. The case has ballooned beyond the initial dispute, and now there's major money at stake. Using the Pilgrim, a lot of other people are kind of coming out of the woodwork, shall we say, saying that this company has not always been on the up and up. And that maybe they did just cut heads off and pocket the $200K, claiming the whole body was in there. You know what I'm saying? When clearly, it was, who's going to check? How you going to do? You going to show up at the cryogenics and, let me see that head that you got in the locker over there.
What a disaster. So where is there satisfaction in sight?
Well, they're going to Superior Court next year. According to this, and they will be battling it out in court. But in the meantime, since his story is broken, other people have come forward with similar claims that this company has bamboozled them by only freezing the head. The case is a lot bigger than we thought, said his attorney. If they win, it could put Elcor out of business. Okay, now here's the problem with putting Elcor out of business. Number one, it would become really stinky really fast in there.
Oh, God.
I'm just saying, do you really want them turning the freezers off?
Well, I don't know.
Maybe there's one light switch that says freezers, and then they hit it as they leave.
They need a surge protector.
Yeah. They need, yeah. What do they do? I would imagine a backup generators.
One would
and
hope
stuff.
there's a generator.
I would hope so. Well, Elcor is a multi-million-dollar nonprofit and biggest cryogenic operation in the world. Is now lawyered. Yeah. Okay. To the hilt, too, the company said. They declined comment, of course, because they want to be ahead of the game. And they don't want to give it all up. So lots of people are now suing them for not doing what they claim that they would do. Well, that's the thing. No, that's the thing. No, okay, now kind of playing God here a little bit, right? And you're rolling the dice. If you're one of the people that signed up for the Elcor program or any other cryogenic program, you're kind of rolling the God dice, aren't you? That maybe they'll bring you back.
Well, of course, you're taking a chance. It's almost like an insurance policy.
Kinda.
Well, in that you're taking a chance. It's a gamble, right? I mean,
It's-
unless it's life insurance, you're going to die eventually. But if it's term, you're rolling the dice that you will die before the term runs out, because then you get money. If your term runs out, you're back to square zero. You put out all that money for over all that time, however long the policy, and you get nothing for it. That's why whole life is in theory a much better investment, but it's way more expensive. I learned all this. We've been going through all the life insurance stuff lately for all of us and trying to figure out what the best way forward is and what the best deal is. And, you got to calculate your age and you got to calculate what kind of shape you're in and on and on and on.
Sure.
So anyway, in that sense, it's like an insurance policy where, it's not like you want things to go wrong, unless you're crooked. You don't want things to go wrong.
What do I care? I won't be around to spend it.
Yeah. Well, I'm talking about like property, fire or whatever. So, you're taking a chance that you're hedging against something going wrong. So in this case, you're taking the chance that someday they will be able to do something with either a frozen body or, as it turns out, in many more cases, a frozen head. Now, I don't know how I feel about the head versus the body. Sure, most of what makes us is in the
soul,
brain.
It's essence. It's
The brain, in theory, but how does the heart play into that? I don't know. I would be very leery of only, if you're going to do it, I would have the whole body. I don't.
Yeah. Have you ever contemplated being frozen?
Not really.
Me neither. When I'm done, I'm done. Just that's the thing. I mean, maybe you do go to heaven, and let's just say you are brought back. How do you know it's your soul that comes back?
What? What are you doing? Don't yank me back here, you clown.
I mean, what if you're in paradise?
I was just having tea with Jesus.
Exactly.
Don't haul me back here to wallow in the muck and mire.
Yeah. Part of me says, why would you want to come back? From what we know from doing a lot of these shows, being dead is pretty good. According to what all the psychics tell us, it's not horrible. I mean, it really is paradise in a lot of ways. And so why would you want to come back to this pain? It just makes no sense. I would not want to be frozen. No.
Well, the other side of that coin, of what you just said, is we also hear from basically all those same people that it is always viewed even from the other side, or I guess I would say especially from the other side, as a privilege to be alive, that there are things gained here and available here that aren't available if you're not alive. Namely, obviously, what we were just talking about. You have a physical body. And there are things you can experience and do with that body that you can't do without a body.
Question, though, for you, sir. Really quick, just hit me in the head, this thought process here. What if reincarnation's a real thing? And you're reincarnated in that time?
I agree. It gets very, very messy. You're right. I mean, what if that, entity, that soul, is not available? Then what comes back?
Maybe demons enter it, or something else enters it. You know what I mean? It's empty vessel.
It could be a pet cemetery type situation.
Oh, I saw that movie, by the way.
Oh, was it?
Oh, I'll get to that as soon as we're done talking about this.
All righty. That's fair.
It could be. I mean, do you really want to come back? Don't bury me at Pet Cemetery.
No, I don't think so. It's one thing if you're revived, right? Within the context of, even if it's minutes or hours, or we get to the point where we can extend the ability to revive someone, say, even to days. That's an entirely different thing from decades.
Yeah, right.
Centuries.
Yeah, I just don't know. I know there's some people that have been just staunch supporters I've talked to about cryogenics and having that chance to live again. But what if there is reincarnation? And let's just say you do come back as somebody else. Does that soul then leave that body to re-inhabit the body you left? And if so, does it leave a void for something else to move in?
A chain reaction.
That you may not want.
All these souls getting sucked out of all these bodies all of a sudden. Oh, my God.
Like a vacuum. Gone.
Yeah,
Heaven forbid they're driving when they get
musical chairs. Think of it that way.
Yeah. So that's a strange story. I guess I understand where the kid is coming from. The son, he wants his father's remains back. He does, he wanted his whole body to be cryogenically frozen. He didn't want just his head. And now he wants...
And he paid for it.
He did. He paid for it, and he wants the money back that was paid. I got it. I'm totally there with that guy. I mean, you know what? The services were not rendered. And so
couldn't agree more.
They should be given back.
So what we're really discussing now is the macro versus the micro. The micro in this case is one individual. He was cheated, let's face it. He deserves to have returned to him what he paid for, the services rendered that he paid for, and he certainly is absolutely perfectly reasonable for him to sue to attain that. The bigger question, the meta level, the mega level, is this a good idea? And if it's almost more worrisome if it is successful, because oh my God, do we want millions of people coming back all of a sudden?
No. I mean, we weren't meant to do that. That's not how nature works. Nature says once your ticket's punched, it's punched. And that's just the way it is. That's nature. Because you're right. What if we have these millions of people? Or worse yet, what if it's like the Reanimator?
I'm agreeing with you. I see all kinds of potential for danger.
Bad.
Danger, Will Robinson.
Nature is showing again and again the folly of men.
That
go Godzilla. You know what I'm saying?
Fewer lines are more prophetic.
So anyhow, I did go see what was a Tuesday night. I went and saw Pet Cemetery, and I had no preconceived judgments on the movie because I'd heard some critics loving it, others just lambasting it. There was very little middle ground there to say, oh, this is all right film. It was either love or hate. And so I went in there, and it was it was okay. It was not that good, in my opinion. That's just my own opinion. It was a movie. Yes, it went on the screen, and yes, it was 2 hours of my life I'll never get back. But if you are going to compare the two films, the 1985 film and this film, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but the 89 film is worlds better, in my opinion. Worlds better.
Interesting.
The movie wasn't bad. I mean, it stuck to some of the core elements, and it kind of threw away others. And the ending, I was not a fan of at all. I thought the ending was not good. That's just my opinion. Again, without giving spoilers, boy, is it hard not to give spoilers about this movie, because everything would be a spoiler, I say, because it's such an iconic movie from the 80s. And they did the best John Lithgow, though, is the bright and shining star in that movie.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that, because I always liked him.
He did a wonderful job in his role. He played his part very, very well. I liked him. He played the part of it's so forgettable. Judd. Sorry,
the old dude.
Yep, Judd, and he did a great job. Not as quite as good as the original guy, but he was in the Munsters, so I mean, he had some some time under his belt of playing crazy, strange,
playing a monster.
Yeah, but
a friendly monster.
Okay, the movie starts. It seems to be basically Pet Sematary with updated cars and houses. Yeah, I mean, just updated version. But then the story takes a pretty swift and strange turn from there. And it's not... Okay, what we've talked about on the show, what they have divulged, and everyone's read this, is they flipped it around a little bit. The little boy survives, the daughter dies. And that actually was not as scary as that little kid. The little kid from the original frickin' was scary, man, because as a little kid, and it wanted to kill you. The girl was more like having a millennial mad at you.
Yes.
It's like, get over yourself. Like, geez, whatever. The movie, is it worth going to the theater to see, in my opinion? I would say wait for Blu-ray on this one. Definitely wait for Blu-ray. Any questions?
I will do just that, and I'll be sure to check it out, and I will make it a comparison. And I haven't watched the original,
and I'm trying not to say,
in a very, very long time. So I'll probably go back and watch that now, and then wait.
Yeah, that's what I would do if you're going
or even
to
cable. I can see it on cable too.
If you're going to watch this movie, though, watch the original, and then watch the new one. And you be the judge which is the better film. Because I'm really trying to not say this movie sucks. I'm really trying not to say that. But if it was a standalone film, it would have been fine. It would have been cool. Okay, standalone film. Without being a remake. Without having to live up to the 89 film. It would have been just fine. But when you have that film to live up to, much like the Curse of the Poltergeist film, it just doesn't stand up.
Well, I've certainly read that. I've read quite a few reviews, and that is a significant portion of the reviewers say just that, and that they really love the original. I think a lot of it comes down to how you feel about the original, because some people lots of people love the original. Others think it was a little cheesy.
It was for its time. I mean, in my opinion, looking at it now with 2019 eyes, I get that. Yeah, it's a little cheesy. Because it was dated as 89. Much different audience back then.
Of course, a different world.
Yeah,
back then.
A little simpler, I would say, back then. And I know one of the guys that was watching it, I didn't know him or anything, in the crowd stands up and says, well, that was an abortion. And he got up and left.
Wow.
Yeah. Then another person said, God, that sucked. So, I mean, judging by just a pure audience reaction, they weren't necessarily digging it either, but I did eat my popcorn, I did drink my soda, and I sat through it, and I was entertained for a good chunk of it. So, like I said, DVD, Blu-ray worthy, or Netflix worthy, whichever comes first. Now, I do know that starting tonight is the Avengers Endgame movie.
Woo!
And so that is slated to be the biggest box office ever, Eric.
It is projected to have the biggest opening ever
Yep.
and turn out to be the biggest cumulative ever. Yep.
So what do you think?
And it's also getting really good reviews.
I will have to go check that out this week. And see, I hate going when the movies for Marvel or any of the superhero movies, when they're first coming out, because I hate packed theaters. I don't like having people right next to me that I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
know.
it's fun. The movie going experience, part of that is an audience. So I like it when it's full, but I agree, not too full.
I think it killed me because the last time I went to go see a Marvel movie on the opening, I think the guy had burritos before he came to the show. And he was a smelly fella, man. Let me tell you. It was like the whole time. The whole time. Horrible. Horrible. But anyhow, that's my review in a nutshell of Pet Sematary. It's good. It's bad. It kind of is ugly. So there you go. We got to run a break. We come back. You're America's Most Haunted Headlines. Be right back at you right after this.
Ranger Station, Ranger speaking.
Yeah, hi. I'd like to report a bear sighting.
Location.
My backyard.
Oh, your backyard. Try telling a bear that.
I did, and this bear talked back.
Talking bear, that's rich.
No, wait, it was Smokey Bear.
Smokey. Why didn't you say so?
I did say so.
Continue.
I was burning yard waste.
No, boy.
He told me to burn legally and responsibly, and to remember that if it's too hot to touch, it's too hot to leave.
And as always, he's right. 9 out of 10 wildfires are caused by humans. That means 9 out of 10 wildfires can be prevented.
Yeah, I know that now.
Thanks to me.
Actually, thanks to Smokey.
As usual, the talking bear gets all the credit. Get your Smokey on. Always burn responsibly and contact your local fire department for open burning regulations. Because 9 out of 10 wildfires can be prevented. Brought to you by Smokey Bear, the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council. Learn more at SmokeyBear.com. Only you can prevent wildfires.
Northern Tool and Equipment.
I got a rather serious problem over here.
All right, what are we looking at?
Cranky mother-in-law asleep on the couch in the man cave.
Dear God.
It gets worse.
That's impossible.
She's passed out on the remote.
I stand corrected.
What do I do?
Okay, I want you to grab a Torrin Big Red hydraulic bottle jack.
Okay.
Now you wedge that bad boy in under your mother-in-law and crank her up skyward.
It's working. And got the remote.
Great. Now grab that Torrin Big Red 2-ton folding shop crane and put that woman on wheels.
And away we go.
There's no problem a little horsepower can't solve. Northern Tool and Equipment.
Welcome back to After Hours AM. I'm your host, Joel Sturgis. Right along with me,
Eric Olson.
Hey, Eric, really quickly, I forgot to mention this the first half hour. We got some changes coming here in your month of May. You're going to have the opportunity to come be with us on Patreon. You say, well, why would I pay for the show? Because guess what? You're going to have a whole lot more access, bigger guests. I know it doesn't get much bigger. Bigger and better guests, but they're all awesome. But here's the deal. No commercials. None. During the Patreon, if you become a subscriber, not only is there no commercials, but you're going to get Patreon-only shows. That's where it's really going to shine because we have some killer guests lined up just for the Patreon, just for you guys if you become a subscriber.
And not only that, but we will be shifting from a live and then, of course, recorded, but our recordings now are literally that, recordings of the live show. We will also be shifting over to a produced, at least, moderately.
Yeah, it'll be cleaned up.
produced podcast format. So we will be joining this century, my friends.
Yeah, that's the wave of the future.
Look, it's what everyone else is doing. So you can only fight City Hall for so long.
So look for us in the coming weeks. I would say give us about a week, maybe two, but we will continue to do shows. We're going to get the Patreon page all up to snuff with all the content in there that's been edited to get the commercials out of there and finally give you guys what you want, the interview only. So you're going to have the option to listen to just the interview only, because that's been one thing that people have said to me again and again. Where can I just hear the interview? I don't necessarily, I like you guys, or I really don't like you guys, but I want to hear the interview. And so that will be an option as well on the Patreon page. You will have the opportunity just to hear the interview with us, of course, doing the interviewing. So look out for that, and you can join for only the low payment of $5 a month. Think about that. That's less than a cup of coffee from Starbucks. Every month, you're going to be getting brand new content, not only this show, but the true crime stuff as well. So that's also included. And look out for a couple new other segments to hit also to be included with your subscription fee.
It's $1 a week, friends.
That's it. That's really it. I mean, it's $5 a month. I mean, come on. Everyone's got that hanging around. And there's also going to be some goodies involved. We'll be doing some giveaways to only to the Patreon subscribers. We're always getting books in the mail we'd like to share with you guys. And also we're going to be partnering. I talked with Llewellyn today. We're going to be partnering with them to be getting you guys some swag from Llewellyn if you become a subscriber. So all that cool stuff. But in the meantime, I want you to fire up your Twitter. And I want you to point that browser over to that Twitter and search out America's Most Haunted, or AM Haunted, like all the cool kids call it, the @ sign with AM Haunted. And I want you to follow along. And once you do all that, if you've never been there, America's-Most-Haunted.com will have the coolest articles ever that go with the show. So you get to read all about Matt Swayne. You get to get the inside track on the interviews and the guests right there, America's-Most-Haunted.com. And it's Amazemo, by the way. Amazemo.
Oh, it is Amazemo. And yeah, and it's a way to get information on how to get a hold of our guests and how to track them down and get the background info. And yeah, it's a cool thing. And as we move forward, when we make some of these changes, like going into podcast mode and whatnot, we're going to go back to adding more articles to the website that aren't only directly related to each of the radio shows and podcasts. We will also be doing more general paranormal stuff like we did until somewhat recently. I have been distracted, as you all know, by a number of things, but I am raring to get back into full balls out America's Most Haunted After Hours AM mode and feeling good about it. All right, so we are on the @AM Haunted Twitter feed, twitter.com/AM Haunted. First one, really cool image. This was a hotel lobby, I guess the largest in North Texas. And now it is super creepy. It's abandoned. It's gone to seed. And the article that we linked to from Smithsonian Magazine, one of our favorites, is a collection of all kinds of images and a description, the background story on some of these locations, on many of these locations, abandoned locations in North Texas. In fact, that's what the original source is. It's abandoned North Texas. So you can click through and see that. But if nothing else, you can check out the super cool image of this huge abandoned but gone to seed ballroom from a long closed hotel.
That is creepy as all hell.
I know it is, because it's so big and you got these two random chairs sitting there.
Yeah. Have you ever
in the
been
middle of the devastation?
Have you ever done any urban exploring where you got into places like that? Just kind of.
Yeah, a little bit. I have. We did a little bit of that in Seattle. We did a little bit of that in Portland when we were visiting. I've done it a little bit in the Los Angeles area, going way back to I guess the 80s when I was living there last. And so yeah, I have done a little. It's you got to be careful.
You do.
You got to follow all the same rules, or you should be following all the same rules as, paranormal investigation. Make sure you have permission. If the place is owned, don't break into places that are clearly closed and are marked. So just be courteous, be cool, and remember these kinds of places can have
be cool, courteous, and kind.
All of it. And remember, these places can have asbestos, mold, all kinds of yucky dust. So be careful. Don't just randomly wander around willy-nilly, my friends.
Exactly. You don't want to get hurt, too, So that way, if you let the owner know you're in there, it covers you because you don't get, if you do get hurt, someone knows you're in there, too. So that's always very important.
Exactly. That's a very good point, actually. Don't ever go exploring or investigating anywhere without letting people know where you're going. And especially, don't do it by yourself. That's just, would you swim in the ocean by yourself? Well, I hope not, because that's a bad idea, too. Don't do dangerous things, potentially dangerous things.
I peed in the ocean once. I didn't know.
By yourself.
Did it matter? I don't know.
In the big picture, no. Although I'm sure it mattered to you at the time.
It did. I'm like, look at that. I'm peeing in the ocean. Yeah, I was a kid,
All right. Guess what?
What am I guessing?
The most recent registered tax-exempt church is in the United States.
Oh, boy. Is it those crazy satanic temple people?
It is.
It is. They're up there shenanigans again, aren't they?
They are, and they are now fully tax-exempt.
So they're recognized. They're recognized as a legitimate religion now. Well, interesting.
Absolutely.
Well, good for those Satan-worshiping folk.
They are recognized by the government.
Well, good for them. Good for them. Yeah, I'm not saying I'd be in the congregation anytime soon, but hey, if that's your bag, God bless you.
So to speak, yes. Well, it's a long and interesting story about them. They are not literally devil worshippers. What they are is they are pro-separation of church and state. And they are very alarmed at the direction that the U.S. government has been heading in terms of conflating church and state. From the very beginning, there is supposed to be a very clear, bright line separating the two. And we've seen quite a bit of blurring of that line in recent times.
In, I think it was 1995, I interviewed Anton LaVey.
Did you?
I did, and he died in 97, if memory serves correct. And it was a couple years before he died. What a colorful character. Very charismatic fella. I mean, and he made a compelling argument for the Church of Satan. So, did I show up and go, oh my God, absolutely, I'm joining? No, but I also didn't begrudge anybody that did.
Right. Well, again, freedom of religion. It is a absolute cornerstone of the American way of life.
Exactly. Well, it's kind of like when I attended the Faith Healer in West Virginia.
Oh, yeah, I've done that, too.
The snake. The snake story.
Mine didn't have the snake, but it was the evangelical, charismatic, speaking in tongues.
Oh, I've been there, too. That was great. I went to one of those one time. They're rolling around, and it was interesting, man. They're getting into it, but... Yeah, I told that story a few weeks ago, so I will not tell it again. But yes, I was not going to that church to find God. I was going to that church to find something completely different.
Well, I bet you could reiterate it in shortened form for those who hear it.
Okay. I was a young radio host, and I was vacationing in West Virginia, and I met a girl at a 7-Eleven. Yes, 7-Eleven. That's how long ago it was. And she took a liking to me, and I took a liking to her. But long story short is if you wanted to get with her, you had to get with her friends. And she was friends with a whole congregation of people. So I went to this tent.
Like a Spice Girl.
Right? It was even bigger than what the Spice Girls wanted. It was a whole congregation. So I go to this tent. It was like in a tent, and there's a revival going on, and they're doing the whole, talking in tongues, rolling around, and I'm rolling my eyes, going, being a good Lutheran boy, I've never seen anything like this in my entire life. And so I'm watching, them all gyrate, which is fine, absolutely fine. The way that they worship is completely up to them, and it's far from me to judge that. Well, so it got to the point to where the preacher went ahead and he grabbed the biggest black snake I've ever seen in my life. Man, this is a huge snake. They say that the little ones watch out for him. No, evidently his big one will kill you too. So he's gyrating around with this snake, and the snake, it bit him so fast. I've never seen a creature in my life move as fast as this snake did to bite him in the neck. Well, he continued to dance around like nothing's wrong. Like, see, the Lord is protecting me even from the evil snake venom. Next thing you know, the guy starts sweating. I mean, sweating. Like it was someone turned the faucet on kind of thing. He falls backwards like a stone statue, toes up in the air. And then, of course, the whole congregation, a big gasp all at one time, and they get on their cell phone again. Where they got a cell phone in West Virginia is anyone's guess, but they had a cell phone. So they called 911, and the paramedics came, and they all left following the paramedics. Go to the hospital. Left me and one other guy in the big tent there with the snake slithering about. And we could hear the snake once in a while, and that's what made it even more terrifying. We know it didn't leave. So we basically drew straws of who would be the one to jump down first to escape. Whoever jumped down first, the snake was going to follow them, so you could have a bad day. So we sat there, argued for about 25 minutes, and then once I got the guts to leave, I jumped off the pew, and the guy, as I was running away, or the steel folding chair, let's not give him that much credit. It was not a pew. It was a steel folding chair, all right?
Pew.
So I jumped down, and I remember this when I was leaving the church. I mean, I was Carl Lewis, the fastest man in the world at that time.
Trailing far behind.
Would have had nothing on me, man. It was the fastest 30-yard dash you ever saw.
Feet didn't touch the ground.
It didn't even touch. And the guy behind me that I left, he goes, "How can you just leave me here?" And I'm like, "Sorry, man, I don't know you." And I left. Yes, that's a misadventure looking for fun. Looking for love in all the wrong places, my friend. Don't do it.
God almighty. Well, that's quite a tale. And the part you didn't add.
Yes, the good old boys.
Is why why did he drop dead?
The snake that they had before was for show, and they've had this snake evidently a very long time, and it was devenomed. I guess is a process that they go through to take the venom glands out of the snakes. Well, unbeknownst to the congregation, that's what had happened. Well, evidently their snake had died. So there's a couple good old boys that were in on the ruse that went out, or at least thought he was who he said he was, right? Said, well, he's immune to snake venom. So evidently they weren't in on the ruse, rather. So they went out and they found a biggest black whatever water moccasin thing they could find. And they put it in there, and he danced with it until it bit him.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, it turns out...
The irony.
Now, years later, I did find out the man did... It was funny, because after I talked about it on the show, one of the parishioners listened, Eric.
Amazing.
And they got a hold of me, and they said, indeed, he did survive. They knew of him, rather. They didn't know... They knew of him. It wasn't like they were there, but they knew of the man. And he did survive, but he was kind of drummed out of the church after that.
Well, I'm glad he survived.
I am too. I'm glad he didn't die right there in front of me from a snake bite.
But he deserves something for the deception.
Yes. Well,
I think he got his comeuppance without having to die.
My life is so strange. Parrots attacking me, serial killers hitchhiking, and snakes biting preachers. What a strange life.
Well, you have visited the four corners, shall we say.
Yeah, exactly. So moving along from our good friends.
What we have next is a very cool, well-done image of the two main characters. So the groom, I don't remember what his name is, and the corpse bride, from the Corpse Bride. and they have been turned
Jack?
into.
You don't remember Jack?
Oh yeah, no, that's Jack's. Was it Jack 2 in Corpse Bride? Or you're not talking about?
Oh
Jack
no,
Skellington?
maybe it wasn't. Maybe it wasn't Jack. Okay.
Jack Skellington
was
is
in Nightmare Before Christmas. Gotcha. Yeah, I forgot.
I can't remember the groom's name, but anyway, it is clearly the groom or the intended groom from the Corpse Bride and the actual Corpse Bride, and they are in the guise of Frankenstein and the Bride of Frankenstein, and so obviously the caption is the real Corpse Bride.
Well, there you go. She's the real deal. Look at her. She looks so happy with her betrothed.
That's about the expression that the Corpse Bride has the whole movie.
Well,
A vague Mona Lisa smile. She's hopeful, but not counting on much. Because she's dead and all.
Yeah, the whole death thing got in the way.
And she was murdered by her, not this guy, but her previous groom-to-be. Killed her.
Oh,
that was not nice.
I never saw that movie Corpse Bride.
Oh, you gotta watch it.
I know, shame on me, because I just never got around to it.
Oh, it's really good.
Is it
Tim
really?
Burton.
Okay.
It's Tim Burton, yeah.
Tim Burton, he's pretty good, but he's also hit and miss sometimes with his stuff.
Couldn't agree more. Totally hit and miss. This one is a hit. It's not a Beetlejuice level hit, but it's a hit.
Good to know. Oh, speaking of filmmakers, really quickly, did you see that Rob Zombie is making yet another film with the family? It's 3 from Hell. And
I did.
That will be interesting to watch.
I'm sure it will be brutal and ugly.
Oh, yeah. Well, would you expect anything else?
I would not. I would expect no less.
All right, moving along. I see there's a man on fire.
Yeah, so this is a really amazing image. It looks like kind of like one of the old Hypnosis Pink Floyd covers, one of the old album covers.
Oh, yeah, Wish You Were Here. Yeah.
It does look somewhat like that. So there's a person, a man, I assume, standing seaside. It's raining. He has an umbrella, and he's on fire.
He's burning for you, man. Burning.
So how's that for a combo? Yeah, another Blue Oyster Cult song.
That is a strange picture. I wonder what he's holding that's on fire.
I am not sure, but it's not just what he's holding. It's also his
whole body.
Suit.
Yeah.
His whole suit. So, it's another case of seaside spontaneous combustion.
I sure hope this is photoshopped. I would not want to be that poor guy.
No.
Never again.
I'll tell you what. I think it is real, but I am certain there is some sort of fireproofing.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, those stunt people that do that. I talked to Kane Hodder one time. And he was talking about he has been on fire several times. He has scars to prove it. And it is not pleasant. Even with all the preparation, it's not pleasant.
No, fire is extremely dangerous. People should never minimize the dangers of fire.
No.
You gotta be careful.
Did you know that you can't breathe while you're in fire? If they do this to you, you can't breathe. They tell you not to breathe. And the reason for that is because you could suck the flames into your lungs.
Exactly. Yeah, think about that. Burn the inside of your lungs. Oh, my God.
Not cool at all. Not cool at all.
Extraordinarily not cool. All right, moving along. I love this image for some reason. I'm not sure why. It's a ghoul-type figure. Very scary-looking ghoul who, if you click on the full image, it depends on the size of your screen, I would imagine. But if you click on the full image, you see that this ghoul is actually putting down roots.
I see that.
Into the ground.
I saw that. Wow, that is creepy as all hell, that is. I would run away from her.
If she is in fact a her, I'm not even sure.
I don't know. I'd run away from her quicker than I ran from that snake, let me tell you.
Whatever it is, male or female or indifferent, it is indeed frightening. And, of course, the caption is, putting down roots, which it is.
That is so true. So
but
true.
The bottom line is it's a super cool image.
That's what matters. The imagery is cool. It's very striking.
Do you remember looking at the next one? That's a famous image. It's 3 figures in full skeleton costumes. But they're obviously costumes. It's not like they're pretending to be actual skeletons. You can see the fabric, the black fabric underneath, the white skeleton figure. And I recognize that image, though I cannot, for the life of me, remember.
I can't remember either, but I think it's an early '80s film. I can't put my finger on it, but yes, I've seen that before. That same image.
So, what I was thinking it looked like is, and it's kind of sad, but it's the Three Stooges today.
Oh. That's true, though. They're all dead, but those poor Stooges.
They are way dead.
They're way, way dead. Way dead.
They're probably skeletons.
It's still funny. Or not, if not dust by now.
If not dust, yes. Depending on how they were disposed of.
Disposed of? You make it sound like throwing away a candy wrapper. Well, that Stooge is gone.
Yeah, another Stooge bites the dust. Another one bites the dust. All right, next image. Very cool painted, obviously, image of a, looks like kind of a sleepwalking young woman in a large head-to-toe nightgown. And she is being led on, it would appear clearly in her sleep, sleepwalking to the edge of a cliff.
Well, there's Shep. He's doing that while the other Three Stooges.
Because there were way more than three. Weren't there total?
There was quite a few.
6?
Yeah, there was quite a few.
There's Mo, there's Larry. They were always the same.
And Curly. Curly wasn't, though. It was Shep. Shep came in.
Curly, Shep. There was Little Joe. Remember him?
I do.
So there's at least 5.
I know. I used to watch that. Yeah, obviously not live or new episodes, but syndication as a small child. Loved it.
Of course. Hilarity ensues, especially when you're a kid.
Yes.
Digging the physical humor. So anyway, this image is this ghoulish, ghostly, skeletal figure is luring this woman apparently to her death off a cliff. But the caption is, "Here she is, Miss America."
Well, Miles will round it out. Don't fear the Reaper.
Oh, Blue Oyster Cult all the time.
Yep.
All right. I guess we got time for one.
We got time. We got all sorts of time.
All the time in the world?
Well, not all the time in the world, but we got 3 minutes, which in Radioland is all the time in the world.
It is quite a bit. All right. So this next one, I love the image, first of all, but the link is to a very interesting, very cool, very spooky article on Mysterious Universe, who we refer to pretty often. And the story is about the variety of evil demons of the Slavic swamp.
Ooh, she looks like a beautiful evil demon.
She is a beautiful evil demon, but she is very evil, and she will lure you into the swamp and devour you.
Black magic woman right there.
Absolutely. She will fall on and devour you.
No, I don't want that happening to me.
So for some reason, the Slavs, Slavic folklore, they are very concerned about what's going on in their swamps.
Well, just don't visit it. That's all. Just stay away from the swamp. Shrek had it right. Get out of my swamp!
I utterly agree. So there's one called a bolotnik, and that is a hunched-over, disheveled-looking old man with scales, frog-like arms, a green beard and hair, oversized mouth, and a tail. If I saw that, I would never return to this.
I would know not to approach him. I mean, just look at him. Come on. He's old and he's got the scales. Yeah, you don't want any part of that.
No, he's grim. I don't like that guy. Or you might run into his wife, the bolotnitsa.
He has a wife?
He's got a wife, and she's equally grim.
Well, yeah, they're a grim bunch in that swamp.
There's another one beautiful, this must be the picture that we used, beautiful female water nymphs called the rusalki, and they're kind of a Slavic version of mermaids, and they live in rivers, lakes, swamps, and marshes, and they're going to get you.
They are going to get you. Stay out of the marshes and swamps over there and overseas there. Where was this again? Let me see. That was Switzerland, wasn't it?
No, any of the Slavic countries.
Okay, so it's kind of like across the board. Stay away from the Slavic swamps.
Exactly.
Not unless you want trouble. We got to get out of here. We're going to come right back at you with Matt Swayne. We're going to be talking about Haunted World War II. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back right after this.
Hi, Tom Bodette. If you can hear me, then you have an internet connection, which means you can do cool things online, like listen to streaming radio, obviously, or watch a video of a monkey washing a cat. Let your freak flag fly. Or you can book a room at a great price at Motel6.com. Isn't the internet wonderful? Everything you want right at your fingertips, and whoa, did not need to see that. I'm Tom Bodette for Motel 6, and we'll leave the light on for you.
Unexpected reactions to smart financial decisions brought to you by feedthepig.org.
Well, I finally did it. My student loan is totally paid off.
I can't believe it.
I can't believe it either. I paid more than the minimum each month, and soon enough, it was gone.
So you're just giving up?
Giving up on what?
The life of luxury. Egyptian cotton, caviar Thursdays, designer everything.
What are you talking about?
Our plan. What happened to winning the lottery and mastering the art of the perfect mimosa? Hosting galas, wearing enough jewelry to require a bodyguard, vacationing in the French Riviera, and then buying it.
I just thought maybe it was time to prepare for my future. You know, set some financial goals, make some smart investments, open a 401k.
Financial goals? Investments? A 401k? You are horrifying right now. Listen, if winning the lottery were easy, everyone would do it.
When it comes to financial stability, don't get left behind. Get tools and tips for saving at feedthepig.org. This message brought to you by the American Institute of CPAs and the Ad Council.
Northern Tool and Equipment.
So me and the boys head out to tailgate today and find some other fans in our spot.
Well, it happens.
Cheering for the wrong team.
Oh, this is war.
Even worse, they've got this couch set up and everything.
A couch?
Yeah, it's sectional.
All right, first thing, don't ever use the word sectional again.
Done.
Second, I want you to grab a 4,700-pound tow chain with J-hook and grab hammer. Throw that on the back of your truck.
Got it.
Now you're going to Hail Mary the J-hook over the end of that couch. Time to find a better spot for your new friends.
That should do it.
There's no problem a little horsepower can't solve. Northern Tool and Equipment.
Taking a family of 5 to the amusement park can cost a small fortune.
Oh, yeah. So to save some money, we thought, hey, let's bring the amusement park to us.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
All right. Step right up, young man. Are you ready to ride the wacky waterfall?
That's just the bathtub with the shower head running.
Nope, it's the wacky waterfall.
It's the shower, Dad.
Waterfall.
Wacky.
There's an easier way to save. To get a free rate quote, go to geico.com. Then buy online, over the phone, or at your local Geico office.
Green light. Hey, girl. School zone. I'm getting hungry. Car changing lanes. You want to meet me for pizza? Stop sign. Intersection clear. Yeah, street. Pizza sounds good. Ballin Street? Girlin Street!
It's hard to concentrate on two things at once, like texting and driving. Stop the text, stop the wrecks. How will you stop texting and driving? Tell us at stoptextstoprex.org. Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
And welcome back to After Hours AM. I'm your host, Joel Sturgis. Right along with me,
Eric Olson.
And tonight we have a great guest on tap. One of our good buds. We've had I've had Matt on. Oh, geez, Matt, it's been so many times, and every time we have you on, it's always awesome. You always bring it. You're always doing something interesting. I mean, you go way back at least 6 or 7 years anyway. So anyhow, I will step aside and let Eric do what Eric does best.
All righty. Well, thank you, Joel. And yes, we are very excited to welcome Matt, officially Matthew L. Swayne, back to the program. He's got another book, another ripper. This one's Haunted World War II. The legacy of the Second World War still captures the world's imagination. In Matthew L. Swayne's Haunted World War II, readers encounter battlefields in Europe and the South Pacific, where the spirits of soldiers, sailors, and civilians return again and again to recreate their last moments, unable or unwilling to let the past go. Learn about the ghosts that haunt the battleships and aircraft carriers that now serve as floating museums. Discover eyewitness reports of phantom World War II fighter planes and bombers forever flying their final missions. Visit the famous battlefields where infantrymen still soldier on long after their heroic deaths. Haunted World War II is filled with paranormal phenomena and unexplained mysteries that will send chills up the reader's spine. But that's not all, my friends. This book also shares fascinating stories of supernatural warfare. Learn about wizards and witches in England casting spells to hold the Germans at bay. Dion Fortune and the Fraternity of the Inner Light working magic in support of the Allies. And Aleister Crowley, we learned it is Crowley, waging a psychic campaign to capture high-ranking Nazi Rudolf Hess. Haunted World War II explores the high strangeness and haunted aftermath of the most devastating clash of nations in world history. Who is Matthew L. Swayne? He's a journalist who currently works as a research writer at Penn State University. He has also worked on writing projects with Paranormal State's Elfie Music. Matthew is the author of 5 books, including Haunted World War II and another forthcoming about haunted railroads. Welcome back to the program, Matt Swayne.
Thank you very much. Boy, I feel like my work is already over now with that introduction.
He is a troubadour. You know, he does go with
what
people.
What can I add?
Show's over.
Brave Sir Harold. He turned and ran away. He ran and ran so fast, so fast.
You know, there's a really quick footnote I want to add in here. When we were talking to Matt before he came on the show, he has another rock and roll book out there called More Haunted Rock and Roll. So you go out, check that out. Make sure you get self-published. And I didn't even know about it until Matt brought it up, and shame on me. So go ahead, buy your copies of that as well. You're not going to be disappointed because we all know how awesome the first book was, and now the second one is kind of all the stuff that came to him after the book was out. It's kind of like getting a new car, right? As soon as you buy it, everyone else tells you about other stuff. You know,
it's a little like that. I think it's actually because I was on shows like yours, and you all have such smart and much better prepared listeners than I, and they would send me their tips and have you thought about looking into this ghost or that ghost, and so that's how I really kind of collected the information for Haunted Rock and Roll 2.
Yeah, again, pick that up. You can get it right there on Amazon. So while you're buying Haunted World War II, buy that copy of More Haunted Rock and Roll 2 while you're at it. So
why not?
Get them both. Bundle them. Give them to someone you love or even someone you don't love. But give it to them.
Haunted, Matt's written about it.
Well,
that's right.
Yes, he has gone out of his way to do that, and that is super cool. Now, World War II has always been a very fascinating subject matter for me. My grandfather served in World War II, both in the German and the Pacific theaters. And so he used to tell me tales about serving and some of the strange things that he would see. I do remember him. He was in the Navy, and he would tell me about seeing what they would coin Foo Fighters back in those days. He wasn't an airman, but he was on a carrier, and he would see just the strangest things in those skies at night that could not be explained. And of course, the pilots back then were pretty much told to shut up and don't even talk about it. Mum's the word on that. And so there was quite a bit of activity going on in the skies above them.
Right. And just to give you kind of a little bit of reference here, what fascinated, and I'll be completely transparent, originally my idea was to write a book about Civil War ghosts, because I feel a little more of I'm a bit of a Civil War nerd myself, so I thought I would I try to write about things that I love, especially, bits of history. Music history was big for me, and military history is big for me. So I thought I would write about Civil War ghosts. But what I found is, as I started to research, a lot of these books that have been written in, let's say, the last 20 years have covered that material so well that I didn't really think that I could add anything to the conversation. And that's when I decided to start compiling stories about World War II ghosts. And then this is really probably the first time that I've tried to expand outside of just the ghosts. And why I did that was because I very quickly realized that World War II was probably the first conflict that suddenly warfare became three-dimensional. It was on the land, it was also on the sea, and it was in the skies above, in ways that even World War I wasn't close to the number of aircrafts used. So suddenly I had all kinds of new material to look at. And one of the phenomena that I found, or didn't find, but made sure that I covered in the book, was Foo Fighters. And I think it was because that for the first time in conflict, people were looking up all the time, and we had so many planes in the skies. So that led to a lot of these unidentified flying objects. Even before we had a word for unidentified flying objects, there were these sightings. And through my research in this book, I was familiar with the ones in Europe, but as you point out, from the aircraft carrier sightings, there were also Foo Fighters in the Pacific Theater with the Japanese.
Yeah. That is super fascinating too, because hearing it firsthand from my grandfather, sitting on the flight deck, they had strict instructions: do not engage a Foo Fighter, because, believe it or not, a couple planes were taken down by Foo Fighters when they did engage.
Oh wow! I did not know that.
And so that was the long-standing rule: do not engage, because their aerial acrobatics were just so much more advanced than ours. They were ripping the planes apart when they were trying to keep up with them, and so interesting.
And this is what I think is really kind of puts the emphasis on these sightings. In my book, I referenced at least there was a series of sightings from a group of night fighters in Europe. And if you think about it, the thing that makes these stories, I guess there's always the cliche UFO story of the hillbilly who's gone out drinking and he falls off his tractor and he sees a UFO. But here we have not just trained observers, and you remember the fraction of a second it would take to know that the airframe that you see coming at you in your aircraft is either a friend or foe, and then you decide whether you engage it. It's a life or death observational decision, and they were trained observers and the best probably that the world has ever seen. And they see these objects that, as you describe, are doing aerobatics that they've never, ever seen an airplane do before. I mean, I really am going to respect that observation. That to me seems to be different from how, at least the mainstream media often frames these UFO sightings. And in this case, you have night fighters who are definitely among the best observation people out there.
Yeah, highly trained, highly, they're taught to recognize who to engage. the best at that time, of course, they're going to know, these pilots are going to know right away. They just described it. Another good friend of mine that was retired from the Navy in the early 80s, and he used to work in an incinerator room. And I know, completely off topic of World War II, but his job was to burn the documentation on a carrier, the reports and things. And there was a lot of stuff talking about UFO reports that he was burning, that they were seeing on flight decks and everything else. And he even saw them for his own eyes. UFOs coming in. That was the early 80s, but wasn't World War II. But World War II, we really became proficient at killing. That's the thing. I think that's what separates the wars. World War I, we had tanks and we had airplanes, but they're kind of rudimentary compared to what they had in World War II.
Sure.
And they came a long way, and it would stand to reason, especially once the big bomb was dropped, why the UFOs would be so interested in our technology, because maybe these cavemen just discovered fire.
Right. There is that connection, and I don't know whether I addressed it in the book, but as I was doing research, of course, a lot of the experts have far more expertise than I do. They were saying that there does seem to be a connection between, especially the dawn of the atomic age and UFO sightings. I think in this case, in World War II, especially with the Foo Fighters, I think it was that there were so many people looking up, and there were so many trained observers in the sky at the time.
Yeah.
So it can be two things, but I think those two reasons right there probably explain most of the sightings.
Yeah, I agree. We're just paying more attention to what's above us, more about it here. I mean, look at the battle for Los Angeles, case in point. Hearing about those tales, and then of course everything was always a weather balloon, Matt. Everything, those pesky things get everywhere.
Well, and I covered that in the book as well, the Battle of Los Angeles, and the War Department called that war jitters. So but again, you have the interesting thing for me when I delve into these stories is that you can approach these stories on a lot of different levels. There, for me, is the entertainment level alone. These stories, because I was born on Halloween and have grown up with ghost stories and UFO tales, and I loved In Search Of and those types of shows. So there's the entertainment value that I really try to, is one of the reasons why I compile these. But then as you dig a little deeper, there's a lot of kind of fascinating sociological, and there's a lot of fascinating in relating back to my old profession as a journalist. There's a lot of interesting stories and narratives that go along with it. And one of the things as a journalist that I looked for was, good witnesses who are credible. And the case of the Battle of Los Angeles, there was at least one witness to that who later, he was just a child at the time, but later became a professor at Occidental University, certainly no slouch there. And he gives this, for me, was a riveting testimonial about how they actually saw something in the sky. He was so close to it that I think some of the shells were falling near his house, and he could see clearly an object that flew over, and it seemed impervious to all the shells that were hitting it. So that right away would eliminate things like blimps or dirigibles, or balloons, weather balloons. It was an incredible, story for me to discover. And he was adamant about it. Years later, was talking about how, there wasn't war jitters,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there was something there. And
what it was, we don't know.
Yeah, it's one thing to have war jitters, but these are highly trained soldiers that you would think just wouldn't fire on anything. They had to have had a reason, and of course the official report is war jitters and balloons and this and that. But you're right. I think I heard that same guy talking years ago about being a child and seeing the craft. And if you look at the pictures, if you really examine them, there's clearly a craft in a couple of those pictures.
And I try to be, unbiased about this, or people would probably say wishy-washy about it, but
sure,
it does clearly look like there is an object in the sky.
Yeah, in the searchlights.
Spotlighted.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, me too. I always thought that there's way more to the story than what we were getting. Now, that being said, though, I mean, what role did magic and psychic warfare play? I mean, it was well known.
Fascinated by
that the Nazis were playing with the occult, unbeknownst most of the time to Hitler, because he was pretty egotistical. But we were also employing magic of our own, weren't we?
Yeah, that is kind of the. So I always say this, but a lot of people write books because they know so much, and I write books because I want to learn more. And so one of the things that I'm always tested on is, as I research these facets, especially the facets of history and the facets of World War II history, I'm always testing my biases. And so prior to writing this book, my idea, especially when I started to look at these stories and try to find evidence for the intervention of magic in the war, I always thought it was the Nazis were involved in the occult, and the Americans and the Allies, the English, were not. They're traditional Christians. What I found was something quite different. I found that there were occult practitioners in the Nazi Party for sure. Its origins were probably occult, but they were very much suppressed, especially, as you point out, by Hitler, who he didn't need any gods or devils above him. He wanted the state was what he wanted people to worship.
Yeah.
So that was kind of an interesting finding for me. But the other thing was that, in England, for sure, there were Wicca practitioners who were actively coming together into covens and with the express purpose of saving England from invasion by the Nazis. And at one point they had this Operation Cone of Power, which was reported, and the numbers vary, anywhere from dozens to hundreds to thousands of witches and warlocks who came together to concentrate their power on eliminating the Nazi threat. And so there was that, and in the United States, we also had the positive thinking movement, or the mind movement, and a lot of those practitioners and a lot of leaders in that philosophical movement were also bringing people together, that collective consciousness to defeat the Nazi war effort specifically. So those were some interesting things that I was not expecting to find.
Yeah, when I was reading the book, I was pleasantly surprised because I had no idea about how deep it went on the Allied end, and the witchcraft point of view and the magic point of view. Aleister Crowley, for instance, he played, some would say, a huge part, and he was. Now, was he a spy for England, or what was his role? Did you uncover in your readings and all your investigations?
Yeah, and Joel, I have to at least pause and say it's so nice that we can talk about haunted rock and roll, and we mention Aleister Crowley,
right?
And we talk about haunted World War II, and we talk about Aleister Crowley. He seems to be everywhere, and his role. There are just Aleister Crowley approached this history like he did a lot of things. There was truth, and then there was a lot of exaggeration, and then there were stories that seemed to even say that exaggeration was right on the money. So what I try to do is cover all those bases, give as many different points of view, but there at least seems to be definitely a connection between Crowley and Ian Fleming, who, later went on to write the James Bond and Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, which is one of my favorites. And Ian Fleming was involved in the British Secret Service at that time, and he connected with Aleister Crowley to, some say that all Aleister was doing was writing horoscopes that they could drop into the Nazi Empire at that time, and try to get people to start doubting Hitler. But then there was this other story where Aleister Crowley and Ian Fleming worked. Crowley performed a magic spell to get Rudolf Hess to fly to England on this quote-unquote peace mission. So, it really depends on who you talk to. The other kind of famous story about Crowley that pops up around World War II is the V for Victory sign, or the peace sign as the Americans have it, but the V for Victory sign that Winston Churchill always flashed was reportedly designed by Crowley to negate the Nazi hand gesture, magical hand gestures, the Heil Hitler salute. So, he's just kind of a fascinating guy that I have found so much about his involvement. Now, it's hard to get some historical data about this, but there does seem to be at least a superficial connection between that. There seems to be superficial records to indicate there was something going on.
Yeah, and Crowley, like you had said, we discussed this earlier. You and I were talking a long time ago about this book when it first dropped. We had you on for Hana Country Music, and it was a great book too. I definitely checked that one out. I mean, Tales from the Honky Tonk is great stuff. Gonna want to pick that up. But anyhow, we kind of talked during a break, and you'd said, the V for Victory was not intended to instill, we will win. It was to ward off evil magic coming from the Nazis. And I looked deeper into it, and I'm like, son of a gun. Matt was right again. Absolutely. He digs deep, man. He digs deep. And so that being said, Crowley, though, he kind of flew under that radar then, because, they had him as the wickedest man ever and stuff like that, when really he was, for the Brits anyway, he was a patriot. Right.
And some of the proof, and I would use that word in quotes because I don't know whether you could definitely take it as proof, but one of the things you have to do is look at the Nazi reaction to Rudolf Hess, because there were some other stories that said that actually Hitler put Hess up to this as a feeler. But if you look at what happens after Hess leaves on this mission, it's considered an embarrassment to the Nazi regime. Hitler immediately purges fortune tellers, occult practitioners, anything in that realm that Hess was known to that realm that he moved in. It was immediately and viciously suppressed. So it sounds to me, at least on superficially, it seems to me that there's something to Crowley's story, that this was more than just dropping horoscopes into the Nazi Empire.
Sure, that would make complete sense. And, being an agent of England and working on their behalf, of course, he's going to want to fly under the radar, because he didn't want to get found out in a lot of ways. So, He was an
Right.
interesting guy. Crowley was definitely an interesting guy. On a side note, his house is up for sale for a mere $600,000 if you're interested, Matt. So
I saw that, and it's pretty much burned down, right?
yeah, you don't get much.
You're getting the ground.
You're getting you're not buying, let's just say, a pristine home for that price.
You're getting some partial walls.
That's about all you're getting. We got to run a break. We come
Well,
back.
what-
Oh, go ahead, sir.
No, I was just saying maybe you and I can get Jimmy Page, and I'll go in on this.
Yeah, we could get together, although I think Jimmy ran out of there screaming. I'm not sure if he'd want anything to do with the house
To go back.
anymore. Yeah, I'm not sure. Because years ago I interviewed Jimmy, and we talked about that. It was for a Guitar Center thing, and we ended up stumbling into that because he very much believes in the occult, Jimmy Page. And he
Sure
talked to
does.
me about leaving Villisca House screaming. He wanted nothing to do with the house. He wanted out. After the dog incident, he was pretty much done. So with that house.
Yes,
So
that would do it.
that would do it right there. We got to run a break. We come back. More Matt L. Swayne and more haunted World War II. We'll be right back right after this.
Northern Tool and Equipment.
So Daddy's little girl thinks she's going to prom tonight with some punk who calls himself Snake.
Yeah, they grow up so fast.
Well, not if I can help it, they don't.
Okay, here's what you do. When that kid shows up, Dad's going to be doing a few chores around the house.
Huh?
It doesn't matter the chore. What's important is that it requires the use of a 60cc gas-powered chainsaw and possibly a mask.
I think it's showtime.
He's here. Dad, I want you to meet.
All right, let her rip.
What's that, honey? Hi, Snake. Great to meet you. But wait, where are you going?
There's no problem a little horsepower can't solve. Northern Tool and Equipment.
Ranger Station, Ranger speaking.
Yeah, hi. I'd like to report a bear sighting.
Location.
My backyard.
Oh, your backyard. Try telling a bear that.
I did, and this bear talked back.
Talking bear, that's rich.
No, wait, it was Smokey Bear.
Smokey. Why didn't you say so?
I did say so.
Continue.
I was burning yard waste.
No, boy.
He told me to burn legally and responsibly, and to remember that if it's too hot to touch, it's too hot to leave.
And as always, he's right. You know, 9 out of 10 wildfires are caused by humans. That means 9 out of 10 wildfires can be prevented.
Yeah, I know that now.
Thanks to me.
Actually, thanks to Smokey.
As usual, the talking bear gets all the credit. Get your Smokey on. Always burn responsibly and contact your local fire department for open burning regulations. Because 9 out of 10 wildfires can be prevented. Brought to you by Smokey Bear, the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council. Learn more at smokeybear.com.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
And welcome back to After Hours AM. I'm your host, Joel Sturgis. Right along with me,
Eric Olson.
And tonight we are having the pleasure, honor, talking to one of our good friends, Matt Swayne, or Matthew L. Swayne, if you want me to be absolutely proper. And we're talking haunted World War II, soldier spirits, ghost planes, and strange synchronicities. What a great book. You guys all have to pick it up. Now, you can get all of Matt's books right there on Amazon. So what I would do is I'd bundle them together. That way, get them all at one time. You can just set aside a week or two and just read everything, because it is that fun to read what he writes. Haunted Rock and Roll, of course, is a classic. Then there's more Haunted Rock and Roll. And then there's country music. Matt, you are truly a versatile writer, and I really appreciate that, because you can go pretty much anywhere.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. That means a lot to me.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. Now, we got to talk a little bit, though. And Eric, absolutely chime on in, because I know you're a big fan.
Ghost stories.
Okay.
Ghost stories.
All right.
Stories.
Yeah, let's switch the gears. Winston Churchill, is he kicking around? Is he haunted anywhere? What's going on with old Churchill?
Well, Churchill's one of the more unique stories in the book because he's not only seen as a ghost, but he's actually seen ghosts. And there's one subway or I think in England they call it the Tube, but there is one subway station that's rumored to be haunted by Winston Churchill. And a few years ago, there was quite a flap because someone actually had a video of what looks like some type of image. I don't know. I looked at it a couple times. I can't say that I see the ghost of Churchill, but in any event, in this subway station or this kind of landing during World War II, they used a lot of those spots as bomb shelters, and Churchill was known to visit those areas. And this one guy said that he definitely saw the ghost of Winston Churchill. There was another report that it was like Churchill actually walked through him. So his ghost does crop up a lot in these haunted World War II stories. But I think one of the kind of funniest stories, and Winston had a killer wit, so it's hard to say whether this was an actual event or whether this was just one of his stories. Although, side note, he did seem to have a understanding and an appreciation and at least an open mind to some of these occult topics. So in any event, that being said, the story goes that he was in Washington, D.C., staying overnight in the White House for a series of meetings with FDR, and he was staying in what was now called the Lincoln bedroom.
Okay.
And allegedly, the story goes that he was taking a bath, and this is the part of the story where the listeners are probably, I will apologize in advance for the imagery that comes out next. But allegedly he was taking a bath, and he got out of the bathtub and was walking into the bedroom stark naked when he looked up and saw the ghost of Abraham Lincoln, whose back was turned to him, and then Lincoln slowly turned around and got an eyeful of a naked Winston Churchill standing before him. So it's hard to say who was more frightened at this point. But I forget what Churchill said, something like, "Oh, I see, Mr. President, you have me at a disadvantage." And at that, the ghost of Abraham Lincoln started to fade away. So, there's a spectrum of stories that you'll find about haunted World War II. Some of them can be lighthearted, and some of them can be very, very depressing and sad and melancholy and frightening. That's just kind of the range you have.
Yeah, and then, of course, one guy that I was always kind of interested in because he was the Desert Fox, Rommel. I always wondered where he would turn up. Has there ever been any sightings of him?
Well, that's probably the another one of example of those contrarian. I had no clue what was going on when I was researching this, but I, like you, thought I had a list of people that you kind of big names always become big ghosts.
Yes.
For a lot of different reasons. So I was looking at the people that had the biggest impact on the war, and then I was trying to find it to see if there were ghost stories. And the truth is that absolutely is what happened. But Rommel was the one. I think he was, for a better choice of terms would be, he was probably the most accessible German general. I mean, there was a lot to hate in that group, but for some reason, Rommel was a little bit above the fray. In any event, I started to look for ghost stories. So my searches were mainly for was he seen in North Africa and Tunisia?
Yeah, that's where I think he'd be.
In those that's where I would think he would be, because he had such fame in those areas. And then I thought, what about Normandy? I did a section on the Ghosts of Normandy, and I thought for sure he would pop up because he designed those defenses.
Mm-hmm.
But in fact, I did not find him in North Africa, in northern France, or even in Germany. Where I found him was in areas of in the United States. There is a ghost story that I think is in a cemetery, Mount Hebron. I believe it's in West Virginia. The story is that on some nights people will be going through this graveyard, and they'll see what looks like a figure standing over some graves of Confederate soldiers, looking down on them, and they describe him as someone that it's been described as a person who looks like Rommel, has a long field jacket on and the field marshal képi that he used to wear. So they say that Rommel haunts this cemetery, and near that cemetery there was a hotel that is also rumored to be haunted by Rommel. People have seen the ghost, and there's a lot of speculation. They smell this pipe smoke. They say that's the field marshal, smoking a pipe. So
okay,
I know your question. How the heck does this happen? So the backstory for this is that, and there is no historical proof of this whatsoever, but there is a story that a group of German generals, including Rommel, on a secret mission between World War I and World War II, came over to the United States to get a up-close sort of feel for some of the Civil War battles. And specifically, they were looking at tactics of Stonewall Jackson during the Shenandoah campaign.
Sure.
And there are some historians, and boy, I'm getting out of my depth here, but there are some historians who would say that people like Stonewall Jackson, this fluid movement of troops, I think Stonewall Jackson was the first one to use trains to take troops from battle to battle. It was an amazing kind of innovative, fluid, offensive maneuvering that Stonewall Jackson became famous for. There is this story that they came to get an understanding of how he was doing that, and then that influenced the Blitzkrieg tactics that the Germans took over. But on the other hand, and most critics will tell you that there is no historical evidence that this trip ever happened. And then on top of that, you'll have the people who are believers who will say, of course, there's no evidence because it was a secret mission. So,
well, yeah, there's that.
It's a confusing ball of nuttiness, but what you do find is that, these ghost stories have come out of it. So skeptics say that, well, that's just, they're reacting to these rumors, and then the believers tell you that, well, maybe this is a sign that they actually did visit these places. These German generals did come over, including Rommel.
Would it be completely shocking if they came over here to study tactics? Probably not. But what is shocking is,
I wouldn't think so.
Why would a German, though, that was dedicated to the fatherland, on the campaign, want to come back to the States, which defeated him ultimately, or helped defeat him, and haunt that area? That really makes no sense to me, but stranger things have happened, and I guess this would be proof of that.
Sure, and there are, and I think I'm getting this right, but I think there are other stories that Rommel is actually looking on the graves of General Patton's descendants, his ancestors, who fought for the Confederacy during the Civil War. So that even adds to now he's not only haunting the graveyard of his enemy, but probably the graves of his greatest enemy during World War II. I guess Patton would have been definitely up there.
Yeah.
So it's a bit mind-boggling.
Well, it wouldn't be a show about haunted World War II if we didn't touch on Normandy. Has to be one of the most haunted places in the world, you would think. I mean, the mass loss of life.
Yeah, well, absolutely. You'd be at least, I don't do any type of quantification of these stories, but I would say that Normandy is one of the most haunted pieces of World War II real estate. And the stories there, bubble up, and there are a lot of tourists that go there, of course. And some of these tourists have come back and have, gone on message boards and have written stories about the experiences they've had. One of the more compelling stories for me was a father and daughter who were visiting, and the daughter was very young, let's say, in 8 years old or so. And they were going through some of the fortifications and the bunkers, and they went into a bunker, and the father said, he was writing the story, said that he didn't experience anything while he was there. Mm-hmm. But later, after they left the bunker, the daughter was saying, who are these men that were laying down and crouched in the corner? And he said, well, I don't even know what you're talking about. I didn't see anybody. And she claimed to see, she started describing some of these people that she saw, and he was a World War II expert and started to think that maybe she actually did have an experience, and he was pretty wise the way he handled it, because he didn't talk to her right then. Mm-hmm. That's more emotional and perhaps, so he waited for a few months and then brought her over, and he said that she had no exposure to anything World War II, that his wife had made him promise not to expose her to some of the books and photos that he looked at and the books that he read. So later he brought her over and started to ask her, he would show her weaponry and say, well, what were they carrying? What were these men carrying that you saw in the bunker? And she clearly picked out weaponry that was being used by the Germans at that time, sure. Uniforms that were being used by those folks. So that was a real compelling story. And then there's some other stories of people in those bunkers who saw these amorphous shapes, and then suddenly these shapes would turn into soldiers, and just as quickly as they formed, they would disappear again.
Wow. Do you think that would be a residual, or do you think that'd be intelligent haunts? I mean, what's the feel you get? From the people?
There are a lot of these paranormal experts say that this is just a residual, that these are just sort of the kind of the spiritual broken record that keeps coming back over and over again. I didn't get any sense that they were interacting with the folks, so that would. Most paranormal experts would probably lean more towards being residual hauntings.
Yeah.
I have to tell you, Joel, that as I'm, writing these, and I'm starting to come up with this idea that less about the real estate really isn't haunted. It's really we are the ones that are haunted. We are.
Sure.
I think it's more of a kind of a I look at music and I look at war and even now that I'm looking into this railroad stuff a little bit, and that for a different reason, that all of these activities are what I would call consciousness changing activities. Music changes our consciousness, and it's so connected with the mystical and the spiritual, and war itself is just this, huge onslaught of emotion and death and depths and despair and all of those things. And so, it's hard to say where the haunted mind ends and where the haunted battlefield begins.
Mm-hmm.
Well, no matter where you go, there you are. And I agree with you. I think in a lot of instances, it's the person. And then the next variable, of course, is how sensitive is that person. And because that's something I think it's not taken enough into account when you're trying to assess, the level of haunting of, say, a given place. It's how many people are dragging things to that location with them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I would think that would be probably less the case where you have so starkly emotional and death and destruction and trauma-ridden geographical locations, as you would with war settings. And it's bigger than that. It's bigger, obviously, than just World War II. War set. You were talking about Civil War earlier. Well, we hear over and over again some of the Civil War locations are among the most haunted, the most active, or the most reported locations in the country. So it would only make sense that was going on there too. So I'm agreeing with you. Moving along, I'm real interested to hear any kind of, like, maybe your creepiest tale from the Pacific. And I was thinking specifically because we had these Japanese soldiers who stuck around for so long, not knowing or not believing that the war was over in so many of these islands, and you had so much isolation. That would seem to me that would lend itself to really persistent hauntings. If they were that persistent in life and that focused and committed and fanatical in life, I would think they might be in death as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And this book was a little bit of a departure for me, because most of the stories I deal with are pretty, at least with haunted rock and roll and country music, they were, for the most part, lighthearted. Even if they were based on tragedies, there's a lighthearted element to it. When you're writing about a ghost of Jim Morrison haunting a bathroom in a Mexican restaurant, you can have a little fun with that. But in World War II, you have these areas that are just very emotionally kind of crushing. And for me, it was the stories in the South Pacific that to me were among those deeply sad types of ghost stories. And one of the stories that I looked at were the Ghosts of Iwo Jima. And several of the residents, it's still mainly a military area, but there are civilians who live there. And one civilian was talking, and one civilian among a bunch of them talked to a newspaper, a Japanese newspaper, I think, that he routinely would fly from Iwo Jima back to the mainland Japan. And, I guess I should preface this story with the Battle of Iwo Jima for the Japanese, and I don't think I'm exaggerating. I don't think there were any Japanese survivors. I think they all pretty much died in place. Maybe some wounded made it out, but they kind of literally fought to the death, and a lot of them died in horrific ways. They were burned alive. They were buried alive on this island, which was a kind of a rocky mess. And the story goes, the civilian said that every late in the evening or early in the morning before his flight back to mainland Japan, he would get a knock on the door, and he would go down and open up the door, and there would be no one there. And he started to believe that it was the spirits of these Japanese soldiers who would want to go along with him back to Japan, back to the homeland. So after he came up with this idea, when he would hear that knock, he would go down and open it, and he would say, "I'm leaving, come along with me." And that was his way of trying to get some peace for these spirit soldiers. So those types of stories kind of crop up a lot in Iwo Jima. And there was another incident with, I think it was a Marine who said that they were on maneuvers, maybe in the 80s and the 90s, long after World War II. And apparently they were on maneuvers and they left back some rear guards on their formation. And these guys later were just terrified, and they were very sheepish about saying what they saw. But according to this Marine, he said that they actually saw what looked like a squad of spectral soldiers, Japanese soldiers, walking through the jungle not too far from their position. So it sounds like a kind of a creepy place. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, when we were at war with Japan, the government, they would tell the people that we're going to eat their babies and we're going to do horrible things to them, and that's a lot of the reason why they really fought with the vigor that they did into the last man, because they truly believed that we were there to decimate not only them but their families, and so
that leads that leads me to the stories about Okinawa, because those again were very, very tough to write about. In this case, those same stories that you were talking about the Japanese in Okinawa were telling and the Japanese knew that Okinawa, if the Americans had Okinawa, they would have air bases that could reach mainland Japan. So this was sort of like the last bastion. And these Japanese commanders were telling the civilians there that the Americans were going to come and they were going to kill, they were going to rape, and they were going to torture. So when the Americans did invade, the American soldiers were horrified when they saw these Japanese civilians running towards the cliffs and jumping off the cliffs, committing suicide, crashing to their deaths. And now there are these ghost stories around those cliff areas. One is near a peace memorial, a peace museum, and allegedly quite a few people have said that they have been walking across this field. They hear what sounds like footsteps behind them. It grows louder and louder. Then they feel this breeze, like people are running by them, and then they hear what sounds like screams coming from the cliffs. Like it's almost like a reenactment of that tragic mass suicide. Yeah, crazy.
That is so sad. I mean, we talk about the Germans, and a lot of times they overshadow the Pacific Theater. But in a lot of ways, the Pacific Theater was far more horrific than anything in the Eastern Theater. I definitely have that feeling now, walking away from some of these stories. It was a kind of a level of brutality that I don't think has much of a match. And it's hard to, again, apples and oranges comparing things, but it was brutal. Yeah.
Brutal and sad.
And then, of course, we nuke them, because we had to. I mean, we had to end the war. And, of course, that brought out even more ghost stories and even more sights of UFOs. And really, even to this day, World War II can be felt. That was such a pivoting part of our society where we moved deeper into the nuclear age. It's still being felt today. It's the war that has never truly gone away.
Absolutely.
And so
I mean, a lot of the stuff that you hear in the headlines we're rehashing the same things over and over again.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Matt, I want to thank you for coming on the show. It was really a lot of fun talking to you again. And
loved it.
Pick it up, Haunted World War II, Soldier Spirits, Ghost Planes, and Strange Synchronicities. You can get it on Amazon. You can get it where books are sold, Barnes & Noble, all your great outlets. Or you can go to Llewellyn and get it right from them as well. And look out for more Haunted Rock and Roll. That just came out. And, Matt, you have one in the hopper dealing with one of my favorite subject matters, and that's the railroad. I cannot wait to read that one as well. Good,
cool.
Great stuff, everyone. Matt L. Swayne, check him out. And how can people get a hold of you with maybe they do have one of those stories, much like
Rock
and Roll.
I'm on Facebook, I'm on Twitter, and you can also I have a website, mattswayne.com, MATTSWAYNE. So I'd be happy to listen to any stories you have.
Very cool. Very, very cool. Until next time, guys, take care of each other, love each other, and read Haunted World War II. You're going to love it. After Hours AM is a production of Midwest Radio Productions. Please like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. And please visit www.americas-most-haunted.com.